My parents decided my brother's dream was worth more than my life. If you like what we do, give us a like and subscribe to the channel. And may the force of Reddit be with you. If someone had told me when I was 10 years old that my own parents would one day calculate my life in dollars and decide I wasn't worth the expense, I probably would have believed them. Not because I hated them, because deep down, I'd already learned exactly where I ranked in our family. Second place. A very distant second. The kind of second place where nobody even remembers your name unless they need something. It took me 17 years to realize something terrifying. Neglect doesn't always look like screaming. Sometimes it looks like silence. Sometimes it looks like watching one child receive every ounce of love while the other slowly disappears right in front of everyone. And by the time anyone notices, it's almost too late. Growing up in Cedar Ridge, Colorado, there were 4 people living in our house. My dad, Richard. My mom, Melissa. My older brother, Tyler. And me, Noah. On paper, we looked like every other middle-class American family. Dad owned a small construction company. Mom taught piano lessons from home. Tyler played baseball. I loved drawing. Simple. Ordinary. Except nothing about our family was ordinary once you stepped inside the front door, because there were really only 3 people who mattered. The rest of us just happened to share the same last name. I learned that lesson before I was even old enough to understand what favoritism meant. When I was 7, Tyler made an elite travel baseball team. My parents celebrated like he'd been drafted into the major leagues. They rented the banquet room at a country club, invited almost 50 relatives, ordered a giant custom cake shaped like a baseball diamond. There was a DJ, professional photographer, personalized jerseys for everyone. My grandparents flew in from Arizona. Every aunt, every uncle, every cousin. People I didn't even know existed somehow showed up. Dad gave a speech about Tyler being destined for greatness. Mom cried through half of it. They spent thousands. A month later, I won the statewide children's illustration contest. My drawing had been selected from nearly 4,000 entries. The prize ceremony was downtown. I wore the nicest clothes I owned. I kept checking the auditorium doors. 5 minutes before it started. 3 minutes. 1 minute. Every time the doors opened, I'd straighten up. Maybe this time. Maybe Dad got off work early. Maybe Mom found a substitute for her lessons. Maybe nobody came. Not one person. When they called my name, the applause echoed through the room. Parents were taking pictures. Families hugged their kids. Mine wasn't there. Afterward, the event coordinator asked where my ride was. I lied. My dad's stuck in traffic. I waited another 30 minutes before finally carrying my framed artwork to the city bus stop. It was snowing. The frame kept slipping out of my numb fingers. I changed buses twice before I got home. The painting was the biggest accomplishment of my life up to that point. It stayed in my bedroom closet because there wasn't room for it anywhere else. The living room walls were already covered. Every inch belonged to Tyler. That afternoon became the blueprint for everything that followed. Tyler wasn't just the favorite. He was the miracle child. My parents had spent almost 8 years trying to have him. 3 failed pregnancies, fertility treatments, more heartbreak than I can imagine. Then Tyler arrived. Healthy. Perfect. Exactly the son they'd dreamed about. 2 years later, I happened. Unexpected. Unplanned. My existence wasn't tragic. It just wasn't part of the plan. Nobody ever said that out loud. They didn't have to. Children notice things adults think they're hiding. Tyler had a nursery hand-painted by a local artist. Mine had leftover wallpaper. Tyler got brand new furniture. I inherited whatever no longer fit him. His birthday parties were neighborhood events. Mine usually happened if Mom remembered to buy cupcakes. By 4th grade, I stopped asking. Teachers always described me the same way. So independent, so mature, so responsible. They had no idea. Being independent sounds impressive until you realize it's just another way of saying no adult bothered helping. I packed my own lunch, did my own laundry, signed my own permission slips, walked myself to school, made dinner if my parents stayed late at Tyler's tournaments. If Tyler forgot something, Dad would drive 30 minutes to deliver it. If I forgot something, it'll teach you responsibility. Funny how responsibility always seemed to apply to one child. The strangest part wasn't the favoritism, it was the denial. Whenever I tried bringing it up, Mom would smile. "We love you boys exactly the same." Then she'd leave early for another one of Tyler's games. Dad had an even better line. "You're imagining things," usually while scrolling through hundreds of photos of Tyler on his phone. Sometimes I'd glance over his shoulder. Entire vacations where I barely appeared. Birthday albums with one blurry picture of me in the background. I started wondering if maybe I really was imagining it. Until friends came over. One afternoon, my best friend, Marcus, stared at the wall in our living room. "Dude, what? Why are there like 50 pictures of Tyler?" I looked. He wasn't exaggerating. Little League, middle school, team portraits, action shots, championship trophies, family vacations centered around baseball. There were 53 framed photos. I counted later. Know how many included me? 2. One was a family Christmas card. The other was accidentally in the background. Even Marcus went quiet. That hurt more than if he'd laughed. Because someone outside my family noticed, which meant I wasn't crazy after all. By 16, drawing wasn't just a hobby anymore. It was my future. I'd spent years building a portfolio, working after school, entering competitions, saving every dollar. Then something impossible happened. I was accepted into a prestigious summer arts residency in Chicago. Only 40 students nationwide made it. Professional instructors, college recruiters, scholarships. The kind of opportunity that changes lives. I sprinted home with the acceptance packet. For once, I thought maybe they'd be proud. Mom skimmed the first page. "Oh," Dad asked one question. "When does Tyler's regional tournament start?" The dates overlapped. Mom folded the acceptance letter. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. We can't drive you. Chicago was 6 hours away. Tyler's tournament was only 90 minutes. But this is my only chance." Dad shrugged. "There'll be others." There weren't. Programs like that don't send second invitations. I watched the enrollment deadline pass while Tyler played baseball in another state. Nobody mentioned my acceptance again. That summer, I got my first real job. Busboy at a family diner. Not because I wanted spending money. Because I already knew something. If I ever went to college, I'd be paying for every penny myself. Tyler didn't have that problem. Everyone knew about his college fund. Mom loved talking about it. We've saved almost $40,000. She'd tell relatives every Thanksgiving. Then they'd smile at me. "So what's your plan, Noah?" Before I could answer, Mom always would. "Oh, Noah's resourceful. He'll figure something out." Everyone laughed. Like surviving without help was some personality trait instead of something they'd forced me to learn. Then everything changed. It started with bruises. Tiny ones. On my arms. My legs. Places I couldn't explain. Then came the exhaustion. Not normal tired. Bone-deep exhaustion. Like gravity suddenly doubled. I blamed work, school, stress, anything except illness. Being sick in our house wasn't encouraged. Being sick was inconvenient, so I ignored it. Until one Friday night. I was carrying a tray of drinks across the diner. The room tilted. Someone asked if I was okay. I tried answering. Instead, everything went black. When I woke up, white ceiling, hospital lights, machines beeping. Mom was crying. Dad looked terrified. For one impossible second, I wondered if maybe this was what being loved felt like. Then the oncologist walked in. He introduced himself as Dr. Michael Chen. He spoke gently, carefully. The blood tests had found something serious. Very serious. Acute leukemia. Aggressive. Advanced. He paused. "I'm honestly surprised you've been able to stay on your feet. The room disappeared around me. Cancer. At 17. That wasn't supposed to happen. And then something even stranger happened. My parents became parents. Real ones. Mom never left my hospital room. She slept in the uncomfortable chair beside my bed, held my hand through chemotherapy. Dad canceled work, canceled projects, canceled baseball tournaments. For the first time in my entire life, I came first. They brought books, movies, favorite snacks, warm blankets, stuffed animals. The kind of things I'd secretly wanted as a little kid. Mom whispered, "I'm so proud of how brave you are." I cried harder than I did during chemo. Not because of the cancer, because I'd waited 17 years to hear those words. For 3 months, I believed losing me had finally shown them what I was worth. The treatment worked. My blood counts improved. Dr. Chen smiled every time he reviewed my labs. "If we finish the full protocol, your chances are excellent." For the first time since diagnosis, I started imagining graduation, college, maybe art school, maybe even a future. I let myself believe I'd survived the hardest part. I had no idea. The real fight hadn't even started. Because while I was counting down the weeks until remission, my parents were counting something else. Money. And the day Tyler received the acceptance letter he'd dreamed about his entire life. My parents quietly decided there wasn't enough left for both of us. The next afternoon, Mom walked into my hospital room, closed the door, sat beside my bed. She wouldn't look me in the eyes. Then she said 7 words. Words that shattered everything I'd believed over the previous 3 months. "Sweetheart, we're stopping your treatment after this round." The choice they thought I'd never fight. For a long moment, I couldn't tell if I'd heard her correctly. The IV pump beside my bed continued its slow, rhythmic clicking. Outside my window, snow drifted lazily across the hospital parking lot. Everything looked perfectly normal, except my entire world had just tilted sideways. What? Mom folded her hands together like she was about to apologize for serving the wrong dinner. "The treatments are becoming very expensive." I stared. She continued before I could speak. "Insurance has covered a lot, sweetheart, but not everything." Still, I didn't answer. Something deep inside me already knew this conversation wasn't really about money. It never had been. It was about priorities, and I'd spent my whole life learning exactly where mine ranked. Mom took a deep breath. "Tyler got accepted." I blinked. "Accepted where?" She actually smiled. "Eastbrook Conservatory." The smile lingered for only a second before she caught herself. "One of the country's most prestigious baseball academies, professional scouts, elite coaching, a direct pipeline to Division I scholarships." It had been Tyler's dream since he was 6 years old. Normally, I would have been genuinely happy for him, but the timing twisted something in my stomach. Mom kept talking. "His tuition, housing, equipment. It's more than we expected." Every word landed heavier than the last. Then came the sentence that still echoes in my nightmares. "We've decided to stop after this chemo cycle." Silence. She reached for my hand. I pulled it away. "Stop?" She nodded slowly. "The doctors have done everything they can." "No." She hesitated. "I mean, they've helped. But there's no guarantee." I felt my heartbeat climbing. "Dr. Chen said I'm responding. He said my numbers are improving," he said. "I know what he said." She interrupted softly. "But sometimes doctors give families hope." Hope. She said the word like it was dangerous, like surviving was somehow unrealistic. She leaned closer. "We don't want your last months to be filled with suffering." Last. Months. Every syllable hit like a hammer. I wasn't dying. Not according to anyone except her. Dr. Chen had literally told me the treatment was working. My scans had improved. The blood counts were climbing every week. Yet somehow, my own mother had already decided my future had an expiration date. She squeezed my blanket. "You've had a beautiful life." I almost laughed. Beautiful? Was she talking about the same childhood? The one where I'd eaten dinner alone half the week? The one where nobody remembered my art shows? The one where I walked everywhere while Tyler got driven across town? Beautiful? She kept going. "Tyler only gets this opportunity once." There it was. Finally. The truth. Not hidden. Not softened. Not disguised. One child had a dream. The other had leukemia. And in her mind, those were competing expenses. "You're choosing baseball." Tears filled her eyes. "Please don't make it sound like that." "How else does it sound? We're making the hardest decision parents can ever make." "No." My voice cracked. "You're making the easiest one." She flinched. "Because we both knew I wasn't wrong." She stood. "I know you're upset." Upset. As if someone had canceled my birthday party. Not my chance to live. "We'll keep you comfortable." Comfortable. That word nearly broke me. She wasn't talking about treatment anymore. She was talking about preparing me to die. Then she walked out, leaving me alone with a machine that was pumping medicine into my body. Medicine she had already decided would soon stop forever. For almost an hour, I didn't move. I couldn't. My brain refused to process what had just happened. Finally, I picked up my phone. My hands shook so badly I kept mistyping. I searched one sentence. "Can parents refuse cancer treatment for their child?" Hundreds of results appeared. Legal articles, medical journals, news stories, court cases. I read until my eyes burned. Then one headline stopped me cold. "Minor wins right to continue life-saving treatment despite parents' objections." I opened it. Then another. Then another. Case after case. Different states. Different illnesses. Same principle. If parents refused medically necessary treatment, the courts could intervene. I sat upright. For the first time all day, I wasn't thinking about dying. I was thinking about fighting. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Mom saying, "Tyler only gets this opportunity once." Around 6 the next morning, I had screenshots covering my phone. Legal definitions, patient rights, medical neglect statutes, hospital advocacy programs, financial assistance, everything. If my parents weren't willing to save me, maybe someone else could. At 7:30, Dr. Michael Chen walked into my room. He immediately stopped. "You look exhausted," I nodded. "You didn't sleep." I didn't answer. He pulled up a chair. "What happened?" That simple question shattered whatever composure I still had. Everything spilled out. Every sentence, every word Mom had spoken, every mention of Tyler, every dollar, every excuse. I repeated it exactly. Dr. Chen never interrupted. But as I talked, his expression changed. Concern, disbelief, then anger, real anger. When I finished, the room stayed silent for several seconds. Finally, he asked quietly, "They're ending treatment because of college expenses?" I nodded. He stood so quickly the chair rolled backward. "No." Just one word. Firm. Certain. "No." He grabbed his tablet. "I'll be right back." He was gone before I could ask where. Less than 40 minutes later, he returned with another woman. Mid-50s. Calm eyes. Gray blazer. Leather notebook tucked beneath one arm. "I'm Karen Mitchell." She offered me a warm smile. "I'm the hospital's senior social worker." She sat beside my bed. "Noah, I need you to tell me everything. Not just yesterday. Everything." So I did. I started at 7 years old. The banquet for Tyler. My lonely bus ride home with the framed artwork. The birthdays. The forgotten school events. The baseball shrine in our living room. The art program I'd lost because nobody would drive me. Buying my own school supplies. Packing my own lunches. Walking to school. Every memory I'd spent years convincing myself wasn't important. Karen never interrupted. She just wrote. Pages and pages. Occasionally asking questions. "How old were you? Who else witnessed this? Did relatives ever notice? Did teachers?" She wasn't looking for drama. She was documenting patterns. Patterns stretching back nearly my entire life. When I finally finished, she closed her notebook. Then she said something I'd never imagined hearing. "Noah, this isn't simply favoritism." I looked up. "This is neglect." The word echoed inside my head. Neglect. Not bad parenting. Not unfortunate circumstances. Neglect. A legal word. A serious one. My stomach tightened. Karen leaned forward. "I need you to understand something. Parents are allowed to make difficult medical decisions, but they are not allowed to deny life-saving treatment that's medically necessary, especially for financial reasons, especially when alternatives exist. Your doctor believes your prognosis is very good." I nodded. "He does," she continued. "Stopping now could undo everything." I swallowed. "So what happens?" Karen didn't hesitate. "We fight." By noon, everything moved frighteningly fast. Dr. Chen prepared a written statement. The oncology department gathered my treatment records. Karen contacted the hospital ethics committee. A legal aid organization agreed to review my case. People I'd never met were working harder to save me than my own family. That realization hurt almost as much as the cancer. Late that afternoon, I sent Tyler a text. "Can you come by alone?" No parents, no explanations, just him. He replied 3 hours later. After practice. I stared at those 2 words. Practice. Even now, baseball came first. Still, he was coming. Maybe, just maybe, he didn't know what Mom had done. He arrived shortly after 8, still wearing his academy hoodie, baseball bag over one shoulder. He looked exhausted, older somehow. He sat quietly beside my bed. For nearly a minute, neither of us spoke. Finally, he whispered, "Mom told me." I waited. He rubbed both hands across his face. "I told them I'd take student loans." I blinked. "You did?" He nodded. "I told them not to touch your treatment." Hope flickered inside me. Maybe this wasn't what I thought. Then he looked away. "They said no." My stomach dropped again. "They said debt would ruin my future." He laughed bitterly. "My future?" Neither of us spoke. Finally, I asked, "The question I need answered." He looked at me. "If it were your decision, would you choose baseball?" He immediately shook his head. "No. No hesitation. No uncertainty. I'd quit tomorrow." The room became painfully quiet. "So why aren't you?" He closed his eyes. "You don't understand, Mom." I almost laughed. "No, you don't understand." He looked miserable. "I've never made a decision without her. Every team, every coach, every class, every friend, every summer. She planned everything." He wasn't defending her. He was admitting something I'd never considered. He'd been controlled his entire life too, just differently. Then he said something that explained everything. Dad's company, it's almost broke, I frowned. What? He nodded. They've been hiding it, lost contracts, credit card debt, a second mortgage. The college fund wasn't nearly as full as everyone believed. They've been pulling money out for years, I stared. So, they panicked, he whispered. They thought they had to choose. I looked him straight in the eyes. No, they decided they had to choose. Those aren't the same thing. He couldn't argue, because he knew I was right. Families struggle financially every day. Most don't solve it by deciding one child should die. As Tyler prepared to leave, Karen stepped into the room. She asked him one question. Would you be willing to write a statement? He froze. She continued. Everything you've witnessed growing up. He looked at me. Then slowly, he nodded. I'll tell the truth. For the first time in years, someone inside my family had finally chosen honesty over loyalty. Karen handed him several sheets of paper. As he walked out carrying them, I couldn't help wondering, would telling the truth finally be enough? Or had my parents already decided that I was a sacrifice they were willing to make? The day my parents had to explain why my brother's future was worth more than my life. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because of the chemotherapy. Not because of the nausea. Not even because I was terrified of what came next. I stayed awake because, for the first time in my life, someone actually believed me. For 17 years, I'd been told I was dramatic, sensitive, jealous, that I imagined the favoritism. Now doctors, social workers, and lawyers were all looking at the exact same story and calling it something else. Neglect. It wasn't in my head. It never had been. The next morning, Karen returned carrying coffee in one hand and a thick folder in the other. She wasn't alone. Beside her walked a man in his late 30s wearing a navy suit with his tie already loosened, like he'd skipped breakfast to get there. This is Daniel Brooks, Karen said. He specializes in emergency family court cases. Daniel shook my hand firmly. I've reviewed your medical records. He looked directly into my eyes. I think we can help. Those 4 words felt almost unreal. For months, I'd been preparing myself to fight cancer. Now I was preparing to fight my own parents. Daniel spread papers across the small hospital table. He explained everything carefully. We're asking the court for temporary authority over your medical decisions. So my parents can't stop treatment? Exactly. And after that, we'll request limited medical independence until you turn 18. I had 7 months left before my birthday. 7 months suddenly felt like a lifetime. Daniel tapped the papers. This moves fast. How fast? Days, not weeks. Cancer doesn't wait. Neither would the court. The hospital's ethics committee met that afternoon. I expected something dramatic. Instead, it was surprisingly quiet. Doctors, nurses, administrators, an ethicist, a chaplain. They asked simple questions. Did I understand my diagnosis? Yes. Did I understand chemotherapy? Yes. Did I understand what would happen if treatment stopped? I swallowed hard. According to Dr. Chen, I'd probably die. Nobody spoke for several seconds. Then one woman asked softly, "What do you want?" No one had asked me that before. Not really. I looked down at my hands. I want to graduate. My own answer surprised me. I want to go to art school. I want an apartment someday. I want a dog. A few people smiled. I want enough time to become a normal adult. Silence filled the room again. Not awkward silence. Heartbroken silence. Because the things I wanted weren't extraordinary. They were ordinary. And ordinary suddenly felt priceless. The committee voted unanimously. They supported the emergency petition. Every single member. For the first time since my diagnosis, I felt like the adults around me were fighting with me instead of deciding things for me. My parents didn't take the news well. They arrived the following afternoon with an attorney. I heard them before I saw them. Dad's voice. Mom crying. Their lawyer insisting the hospital had no right to interfere with private family decisions. Karen met them outside my room. Their conversation quickly became an argument. The words echoed down the hallway. Parental rights, medical neglect, emergency intervention, life-threatening. Eventually, everything went quiet. Karen came back inside. They won't be visiting today, I nodded. Oddly, I wasn't disappointed. For the first time in years, their absence hurt less than their presence. That evening, Dr. Chen returned carrying another folder. This, he said, placing it on my tray table, is what the judge will see. Inside were charts. blood counts, scans, treatment schedules, and one page highlighted in yellow. He pointed to two numbers. If you complete treatment, approximately 75% chance of long-term survival. He moved his finger lower. If treatment stops now. The second number was barely visible because my eyes had already filled with tears. 15%. I stared at those numbers for a long time. My parents weren't choosing between certainty and uncertainty. They were choosing between hope and surrender. Later that evening, someone from the hospital's financial office visited. His name was Aaron. He looked uncomfortable before he'd even sat down. I thought you should understand the actual costs. He pulled up my account. Treatment to date had exceeded $40,000. Insurance had paid almost everything. The remaining amount my parents actually owed? Just over $11,000. The future treatments? Insurance would cover most of them too. Their expected responsibility? Roughly $9,000. 9,000. Not 90. Not 200. 9. My entire future, reduced to the price of a used car. Aaron quietly explained payment plans, charity programs, state assistance, hospital grants, crowdfunding resources. Programs my parents had never even bothered asking about. They hadn't run out of options. They'd simply stopped looking. The next morning, Daniel received Tyler's written statement. 7 handwritten pages. Every birthday, every missed recital, every forgotten art competition, every time our parents chose him over me. Daniel read silently for nearly 15 minutes. Then he looked up. This changes everything, because it didn't come from me. It came from the favorite child. The court hearing was scheduled less than 72 hours later. Everything happened in a blur. Practice questions, legal paperwork, medical updates. I barely noticed another round of chemotherapy passing through my veins. My biggest fear wasn't cancer anymore. It was walking into a courtroom and hearing a judge decide my parents had the right to let me die. The courthouse wasn't impressive. Old brick. Metal detectors. Long hallways. Everything smelled faintly of coffee and old paper. Daniel walked beside me, carrying 3 overflowing binders. My parents sat across the waiting room. Dad stared at the floor. Mom refused to look in my direction. For years, I dreamed about them finally seeing me. Now, they couldn't even meet my eyes. The judge entered promptly at 9. Everyone stood. The hearing began immediately. Dr. Chen testified first. Calm. Professional. Clear. He explained leukemia. He explained chemotherapy. He explained my progress. Then he said one sentence that silenced the room. If Noah stops treatment now, he will almost certainly lose a chance at a normal lifespan. Not might. Not possibly. Almost certainly. My parents' attorney tried to suggest there were no guarantees. Dr. Chen nodded. Medicine never guarantees outcomes, but abandoning effective treatment guarantees worse ones. The lawyer had no response. Karen testified next. She described years of documented neglect. She spoke about my childhood, the missed school events, the emotional abandonment, the sudden increase in parental attention only after my diagnosis. Then, the sudden withdrawal of support immediately after Tyler's academy acceptance. She never raised her voice. She didn't need to. Facts can be louder than anger. Then Daniel introduced Tyler's statement. The courtroom became almost painfully quiet. The judge read portions herself. Tyler admitted he'd offered to decline the academy. He'd offered student loans. He'd even offered to postpone enrollment. Our parents had refused every suggestion, because they believed protecting his future mattered more than protecting my present. I heard someone in the gallery quietly gasp. Finally, the judge looked at me. Mr. Carter. My legs felt weak as I walked to the witness stand. What would you like the court to know? I took one slow breath. I don't want special treatment. I don't want revenge. I don't even want my parents punished. I looked toward the judge. I just don't want to die because someone decided I cost too much. The courtroom stayed silent. I continued. My doctor says the treatment is working. I believe him. I want the chance to finish. I want the chance to become whoever I'm supposed to become. I hesitated. I think every kid deserves at least that. Then came the moment none of us expected. The judge turned toward my parents. Mrs. Carter. Mom slowly looked up. Did you investigate financial assistance? No. Hospital charity programs? No. State medical assistance? No. Payment plans? No. The judge paused. Why not? Mom's lips trembled. We thought there wasn't another choice. The judge leaned forward. There is always another choice before allowing your child to die. No one moved. No one breathed. Then she asked the question everyone already knew the answer to. Mrs. Carter, Did you prioritize one child's education over another child's life? Mom opened her mouth. Nothing came out. The silence answered for her. The judge didn't leave the bench. She ruled immediately. Emergency authority over my medical treatment was transferred to the hospital. My chemotherapy would continue. Applications for every available assistance program would begin that afternoon. My parents were ordered to cooperate fully. Then she looked directly at me. I sincerely hope you focus on getting well. The gavel struck. Just like that. The fight was over. Outside the courtroom, I finally exhaled. Daniel smiled. Karen hugged me. Even Dr. Chen looked relieved. For the first time in months, I wasn't wondering if I'd survive the week. I could finally think about surviving the year. The following months weren't easy. Chemotherapy never is. There were infections. More hospital stays. Days I couldn't get out of bed. Days I questioned everything. But treatment continued. Exactly as planned. 1 round became 2. 2 became 6. Then one unforgettable afternoon, Dr. Chen walked into the exam room holding a folder. He couldn't stop smiling. I've been waiting a long time to say this. He looked directly at me. "You're in remission," I cried before he even finished the sentence. Karen cried too. Even Dr. Chen had suspiciously watery eyes. After everything, I was alive. Life slowly rebuilt itself. Community fundraisers covered expenses the assistance programs didn't. My coworkers from the diner organized charity events. Former teachers reached out. Artists I'd admired online donated supplies. People I'd barely known fought harder for me than my own parents ever had. That truth hurt, but it also healed something. Family isn't always determined by blood. Sometimes, it's determined by who refuses to give up on you. Tyler never attended Eastbrook. He turned it down. Instead, he enrolled at a local university. We weren't suddenly best friends. Too much history stood between us. But for the first time, we were honest with each other. That was enough. As for my parents, the court couldn't force love. Only responsibility. We rarely spoke after I turned 18. Sometimes people ask if I ever forgave them. The answer surprises them. Forgiveness isn't pretending something never happened. Forgiveness is refusing to let someone else's choices control the rest of your life. I forgave them for my own peace. But I never forgot. Because forgetting would have meant pretending the lesson wasn't real. And it was. The people who are supposed to protect you sometimes won't. When that happens, you keep fighting anyway. Because your value is never determined by someone else's willingness to see it. Sometimes, the first person who has to believe your life is worth saving is you.